Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bonded Sister Edition. I'm Christina, and I'm here with my sisters, Gina and Vanessa. And today we have a very special episode with our guest, our dad.
Dun, 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 dun. Daddy edition.
By virtue of popular request, we are going to have a very special episode tonight.
This was the most requested special guest on our Instagram, that Dad, you show up for a podcast episode.
I think it was because of my performance in the pool with the floaty on my head. The audience just couldn't get enough of that, so they voted me in for this episode.
For context, we did a reel where he has a floaty on his head because some people might not realize.
I can add that into the top corner.
Yes.
But we are giving the people what they want today.
We want to keep it freestyle, but have some prompt questions for Dad, some that we found were the most foundational to hear about his life and his testimony. We have 7 questions. So, Christina, I feel like we should just dive right in.
Okay, let's do it. So, Dad, first question, tell us about your upbringing and how you were raised.
Well, I was raised in Davenport, Iowa. I was one of 11 kids. I had 3 older brothers, 3 younger brothers, 2 older sisters, and 2 younger sisters. Now, what that means is I learned how to take a punch from my older brothers, and I learned how to give a punch to my younger brothers. So I was a well-balanced young man.
Oh wow, 11 kids.
Yes.
I think that is usually pretty shocking to most people today.
Well, we were a good Catholic family. My parents did practice the rhythm method, but they couldn't keep a beat. 11 kids later, here we go.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Okay, so wait, tell everyone the size house you lived in, because you know how we all complain about, like, you know, room?
Yes, I always find that funny because we lived in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, and we had 13 people, and everybody needed to use the bathroom occasionally. So what that taught you was that, you know, you had to share, you had to plan ahead, you had to be organized. All these things you had to do. Otherwise, you know, you're outside looking for a tree.
So you had 2 bunk beds with the girls, 3 bunk beds for the boys, and
Yep.
your eldest brother was in the basement, right? Is that how it worked?
Correct. We had a half a bath in the basement.
Wow. What was their parenting style like with raising 11 kids? What was that dynamic like?
It was mostly love, and then I would say fun, and then I would say discipline. And with 11 kids, the discipline has to come first. Otherwise, you got no room for fun because you're constantly scrambling, you know, for organization or, you know, to get a handle on things. So there was definitely discipline in the family. What it taught me from the beginning is I'm not the center of the universe. So, and there's other people with other concerns and other needs. And so what that taught me to do was how to get along, how to speak to, you know, different types of people in different situations, many different situations. So from that aspect, it gave me, as I left my family, it gave me a really good read on people because just about every one of the personality types out there were represented in my family. So when I met somebody, I was like, oh, you're like my sister, Teresa. Okay, I know how to deal with you.
That makes so much sense.
What was the best thing about having a lot of siblings, and what was the hardest thing about having a lot of siblings?
Well, the best thing, for the most part, I hung with my brothers. My sisters were, you know, did their thing with you know, the sisters, like you guys. And but what we did almost every day was play sports. And it was pretty competitive. There was some bloodletting. And so I learned toughness, you know, through that. But I also learned play fair, play by the rules. Don't cheat because your brothers will call you out every single time. And so I learned, you know, some valuable lessons there. It's better to never cheat than to cheat and get caught, which is a good lesson to learn, actually, because some people still try to cheat. And so I learned some good lessons that way. And those, the fun times were, you know, just playing sports every day with my brothers. Most of it was just a blast. And we would take on the neighborhood. That was also fun and exciting.
Well, what was the hardest thing?
Well, the hardest thing was I was a kind of a rambunctious young individual. So sometimes I had to learn things the hard way, like my middle child. No names. No names. You know, so a couple of times I got brought home by the police. And
Couple times.
never.
I only heard about once. What's these other couple?
Okay, let's leave that alone. So when you have a rambunctious personality and And one of the things that you kind of happens, at least for me, when I was in a family growing up, was you're kind of always looking for a little attention from your parents because you're in competition for that. That competition was pretty intense for the attention of just the two parents because they were busy people. So you had to do something pretty outstanding just to get way to go, Joe, or good job, Joe, or whatever. So I learned to push the limits a little bit, and sometimes that was good, and sometimes it was bad.
I think a theme that we're going to see reoccurring is like the toughness theme. Like if you're watching and you're getting that sense of, the camaraderie with the brothers and everything coming through, I think Dad's faith testimony, like the theme threads through of like toughness.
You have to be tough in a big family. You have to be able to take it on the chin and, because it's just not going to go your way a lot.
Sounds like the lack of coddling was kind of a gift in your life in a way.
And that served me well all throughout my life because in this competitive world of, I own my own business now, and if I don't drive my business, nobody does. And thanks be to God and St. Joseph, my patron saint, that's been very successful. And I've been able to, basically raise 3 kids and have my wife stay at home. It served me well that young kind of go out and get it done stuff.
I like this question. This is a good one. I don't know which route you're going to go because we know you have a couple of these, but what was a major event that altered the course of your life? You can name more than one, but what's the first one?
There was 3 major events that shaped my character. The first one, when I was 17, I was working out in a clearing fields, doing a housing project way out in the sticks in Iowa. And when I say out in the sticks in Iowa, it's a half an hour by car before you get to civilization. So we're out there in the sticks. We're clearing land and, building houses and stuff like that. And we have this huge pile about, 300 by 300, and it's like 12 foot high. We just kept throwing everything on top of this pile, and then the bosses said, burn it. So I get up there on top of this pile. I'm 12 feet off the ground, and I'm pouring a 5-gallon gasoline tank on tires and tree trunks and stuff like that to get this thing burning. And I heard the worst noise that I ever heard. Poof. And the next thing I know, I'm engulfed in flames, and my body's on fire. I don't know how, but I come tumbling down out of that flames and I hit the ground. And the first thing you want to do when I hit the ground off that big pile and my body's on fire is you want to run. And if you run, you die because you just burn out and then your body can't recuperate. And so I hit the ground and I rolled. Unfortunately, we just got done trimming some trees, and there was those trees, those long, sharp, needle-like thorns. And so we had to pull those out of the burn spots all over my body. And so that was kind of painful. And unfortunately, it was 30 minutes to the nearest medical facility, the nearest hospital. And I thought we were going to get in a crash because the guy that was driving me was almost in a state of shock because you could smell my melted flesh, the burning skin, the burning hair. I had this horrific look on my face. He couldn't even look at me, and I thought he was going to crash. He was doing 90 miles an hour on gravel road. I thought we were going to die on the way to the hospital, which wouldn't have bothered me, by the way. So we get to the hospital, and kind of God gave me a message there. Because at that point in my life, 17 years old, between my senior year in high school, freshman year in college, I was not behaving as a good Catholic, good Christian. And I think God was telling me something there. He says, Joe, you continue on this path, and this is what's waiting for you. So that was the first thing that shaped my life.
When you got to the hospital, you were covered in, I think it's like obvious 3rd-degree burns.
Yeah, it's 70% coverage. So I was in reverse isolation because they were extremely worried about infection. And eventually we got through it. And it was miraculous, but to this day, you can't see a single burn mark on my body.
It was definitely a miracle. God has spared you more than once from tragedy and almost the loss of your life. He just had such a special calling on your life, and the Holy Spirit has a mission for you. And so these miraculous signs were all just like leading up to that path that God had waiting for you.
Yes, this path has all led me to this podcast. This is my moment. These people are in the way. This is my moment. Just kidding.
Oh my gosh. Okay, episode 2. I'm dying. I'm on the edge of my seat. What's episode 2?
Episode 2 was, we were kind of obviously poor. I wanted to play on the tennis team. I don't know why, I just did. And so I go out and I get a racket at a dollar store, Ben Franklin dollar store. So it was a $1 racket, made in China, whatever. And then I'm in a private high school, so everybody's got brand new, best of the rackets ever. So I show up in these old, tennis shoes that got holes in them. My socks don't stay up. I mean, it was, the poor kid thing. And so I got there, and my own teammates laughed at me. But I was the type of kid where I was like, really? You're going to laugh at me? So I ended up, even though I never had a lesson and I just kind of joined the team on a whim, I ended up making the varsity team to the surprise of everybody on the team. So we go, and our first match is against the best team in our conference. And everybody on the varsity team got smoked. In high school, it's 12 games, win by 2. So 12-0, 12-0, 12-0, they were all smoked. Those guys all came to my court, the guys, on the other team. And they were laughing, saying, what's taking you so long? Finish this guy. And he goes, don't worry, he's almost finished. That upset me. That pissed me off.
That struck a nerve.
And so I decided.
Didn't they make fun of your racket?
Oh, yeah.
Too?
Yeah.
The racket that you bought?
Yeah. So I decided that it was time, to run down every ball, to get everything. I literally played in anger. And this guy who was laughing at me, when I hit the last ball in and beat him 12 games to 10, I thought this young man was going to cry. And I actually felt a little bad for him because he went from here to here, and I'm going, he kind of deserved it though. So, but I learned something there. I learned that not only was I probably the worst tennis player on my team, but I was definitely the worst player, the least talented player on their team, and yet I walked away with the victory. So that taught me a very valuable lesson in life, and that is, it's not how good you are. It's not how much you know. It's about effort. And that's what I brought to that match. I brought effort. And that was the difference between a guy who can barely play to playing against a guy who's had lessons, the best equipment, walking off the court in tears. I learned something. It is about effort. And that kind of set the course for the rest of my life.
I'm starting to relate very much. I'm starting to understand who I'm like.
I was going to say,
episode.
Vanessa, I feel like you have such an appreciation for this particular story because you relate to it and what kind of drives your competitive nature.
In my music, because I'm a singer in singing competitions, I feel like that's exactly how I would be. Like, it wasn't until someone maybe got me a little upset, that's when all of a sudden I transformed even more into this, this fire ignited, and I was even better than I was before the fire ignited. Something just happens, it takes you over.
Yes.
And you're like, you come out swinging like he did.
I've seen that in you, so you're correct.
I think it's also about a little bit about not the bad kind of pride, but the good kind of pride, like having pride in everything you do. There was never something you didn't do wholeheartedly. Like that's like also a very, very much like an intrinsic part of your character that showed through.
I knew that if I did lose that match, it wasn't going to be because I quit on myself.
Yeah.
I was given everything on every point.
You left everything on the court.
What podcast is this right now?
I know.
Is this ESPN?
Okay, Dad, third episode. You've got one more.
This was the third thing is what set the tone for the rest of my life. I was, through college, I was a little bit of a party boy, and then right after college, I was looking for a job in my field of mass communications, journalism, and I had a job where I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do yet, but I had a job where I was making enough money where I could do what I want, go where I wanted. And so I ended up, hanging out with the nice people, but, all we basically did was kind of date and party. And then I got to a point in my life where I said to myself, I was like 26. I'm going, really? This is all there is to life? You go out, you party, you wake up, you're hungover, you sober up, you go out and you do it again. And then you work hard for a week and, you start the whole thing over again. To me, that was like, there's no meaning in this life. There's no accomplishment in this life. There's no purpose in this type of a lifestyle. And I had that Catholic upbringing from two solid Catholic parents. And we went to church as a family every Sunday. I played, in the music ministry at my church. And and I went to Catholic school all through high school. So the roots were there. So when I got to this point where life was meaningless and life was like just pointless, I knew where I had to go. So I went to this church and I says, all right, Lord, here I am, right? Do with me as you will. And I'm looking around and everywhere I see, there's gray-haired people. And I said to the Lord, I says, look, all these senior citizens, Lord, I go, what am I going to do here? Call bingo? I go, I don't know if this is going to work for me, Lord. But I said, let me get down on my knees. And I prayed this prayer. I says, Lord, you know me. I'm a worker. I'll do whatever it takes. But please, show me the way. So that was my prayer, short and sweet. The priest gets up there with the homily. And wouldn't you know, on that day, after I've been away from the church for a number of years, he said, we're starting a young adult ministry and we need young people to come forward and volunteer to get this thing kicked off. Wow. Electricity literally went through my body from head to toe because I knew for a fact my prayer was just answered. And I'm going, dude, this thing really works. This prayer thing really works. Lottery numbers, quick. And here's how you know it's God's promise. It's God answering a prayer. We went from 6 people that night. Within 6 months, we had 150 young professional Catholics in that church when that night I didn't see one. That's how God works. That's how God answers prayer. And then I knew from that day on, God had answered my prayer. And God helped me if I ever went back to the old lifestyle because God had answered my prayer. And what kind of an ingrate would I be if I turned my back on what I knew was an answered prayer?
I mean, we've heard this story. Hearing it again, though, is still just as impactful. But I also think it's like such a grace. And going back to scripture where God says he chooses you, he calls you by name, knits you in your mother's womb, calls you by name from that point. But it's such a grace that you recognize God's answered prayer because so many prayers God answers, they go unrecognized, right? So the fact that you felt it, held on to it with all your might, I mean, it's awesome. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I actually started pushing the limits with this prayer thing because I figured, hey, this is a great group to meet young ladies, maybe find a wife, have a family. Dude, I dated a lot, almost half of the women in that young adult ministry, and nothing, zippo, nada. And so I'm thinking, this is weird. And so I thought to myself, maybe God wants me to, be a priest.
Spoiler alert, here we are.
Spoiler alert, if you haven't figured it out yet.
That didn't happen.
But in faith, I got down on my knees and I thought maybe God wants me to be a priest, but I knew that you don't just become a priest. You don't volunteer to become a priest. It's not like the Protestants. They feel called, so they go. In the Catholic faith, you have to be called. And I knew that. When you become a priest as a Catholic, you have to go to the bishop and convince him God has called you. And I knew that. So I said, all right, if just one of these ladies, Lord,
anyone from the church, right?
Anyone
if anyone
from the church
came up to
me and said, you know what, Joe? Did you ever think about being a priest? Because I think you'd make a good priest. Lord, I will take that as you're calling me to the priesthood. And I will resign my job tomorrow and join the seminary the next day. So I'm just waiting for the Lord to answer my prayer. Well, within a week or so, their mother walks in the door of our young adult ministry, wanting to join and get involved in stuff like that. And as soon as I saw her, I knew I wasn't called to be a priest because I thought to myself, wow, what a beautiful lady this is. I go, and what a lucky guy it's going to be that ever gets to marry some classy girl like this. Not even thinking I'm in the same league. But of course, not even think I'm in the same league. That's right where I want to be, right? because I'm the
comfort zone.
go-getter. I'm the underdog, and I knew I had to bring my A game. And you're seeing the results of my A game right here at the table.
Oh my God.
Well, yes, I think
A
that,
proof for the A game.
I think that definitely speaks to the power of prayer and just to that relationship that the Holy Spirit called you to have with God and brought you into that space. And I think that really also shows that when you're seeking God's direction, He will very clearly give it to you. It may not be as instantaneous as the experience that you had, but the Lord wants to give us His direction and lead us with His Spirit. And it's just so clear that God was just forming you, making the way straight before your eyes. I love Proverbs chapter 3 where it says, acknowledge Him in all your ways and He will make your path straight. And I think that's just what we see with that.
I taught all three of these girls catechism, right? And I always used to teach them in catechism class. It's not the what. We all know what the what is. You show up for mass, you do your sacraments. I says the power in our faith is the why. What's the why behind that story? What's the power behind that prayer being answered?
Your willingness?
Yes. The power of the why in that story is I came to God and I said, I'm all in. If you want me for the rest of my life, I will forsake family. I will forsake wife. I am all in. And that's when He answered my prayer that I didn't even pray for. And May, their mother, walked in the door. I knew that God had answered my prayer, but only after He knew I'm all in. And if you are not all in as a Christian, you're not yet a Christian.
Cool.
So you're
Love
saying
that.
like when you like truly surrendered your life to God, you saw the fruits of surrendering basically very quickly. Sounds like.
And not till after. That's the way God works. You see the fruit after the commitment, after the sacrifice. Look at all the stories in the Bible. It's the blessing is always after the sacrifice. Abraham went up there to kill his own child that he didn't think he'd ever have. He had the knife like this. And after he was starting to plunge, God stopped him and granted him his heart's desire.
It's a great segue into the next question. Actually, perfect. What a smooth transition. So how did you know Mom was the one?
I couldn't eat. I couldn't catch a fly ball. I was completely distracted. I couldn't sleep because all I would do was think about her. And that's how I knew she was the right one. And the other thing is I dated all those other girls, right? And nothing. So I never had this feeling before in my life. And that was, you could say, well, that was just a physical manifestation of her beauty and stuff like that. But the other thing was she made me better. She pushed me to be better. And in a good relationship, in a healthy relationship, both people get better. Both people become stronger. Both people become more secure in who they are as individuals, even though they're bonded in matrimony. And that was the thing that happened to me and May right off of the bat. I never considered anything but her being my wife. And so from the day I met her until the day we walked down the aisle,
Which
that
wasn't
was
long, by the way.
Oh, we dated 2 weeks before I got up the nerve to ask her to marry me. And the crazy miracle part about that, here's another miracle, is my wife is very, all right, let's think about this. Let's take our time. Let's get really, and she's not like, so the miracle wasn't that I'm the crazy one. I'm like, yeah, I know what I want. I know what I got. And I'm going to, I'm all in.
I'm going for it.
And so that wasn't the miracle. That's my normal behavior. But the miracle was after 2 weeks of dating, 5 dates, 2 weeks later, she said, yes, I'll spend the rest of my life with you.
To clarify, they did know each other for a couple months before that, but it is still pretty crazy.
It's still true that they technically only dated for 2 weeks.
2 weeks a date. 5 dates, 2 weeks.
Her parents thought she was insane.
Oh
I mean,
my
it was
gosh.
the whole thing that you would expect after dating a man for 2 weeks and then saying you're going to marry him. And mind you, 6-month engagement. So, yeah.
And they've been married now for 35 years?
Yeah, and I now that I have 3 daughters of marrying age, I can't, like this one here who's married, right? I can't imagine her coming up to me, and I never even met this guy, and saying, Dad, I want you to meet your future son-in-law. And I'd be like, he's not my future son-in-law. I'll let you know if he's my future son-in-law after I get to know him. But right now, he is not. And that's what I would have said to her. I says, I got to check this guy out. All right. I'm sure you're in love. There's no doubt about it, but I'm checking this guy out. And so that's the way May introduced me to her father. That's the first time I met him. She said, Dad, this is Joe, your new son-in-law. I was like, dude.
This is Joe, my fiance.
Wild.
Fiance.
Listening to you tell the story about mom and everything and how you knew she was the one, like I just kind of want to pick your brain. Do you believe in soulmates? What do you think of that? Do you think mom is your soulmate?
Yeah, people will talk about coincidence and I got lucky with the gas can because, listen, I'm pouring 5-gallon container of gas on a fire when that thing exploded into flames. Gas can should have exploded. It didn't. All right. And there's been a couple other times where I probably should have died, but I didn't. And one time was when I was born. I was in ICU I couldn't eat. I was throwing up. I was losing weight as an infant. And it was touch and go there for a while. So I'm not one of these coincidence guys. I think God has a plan. And I don't think anything is a coincidence. I think if there were coincidence, what kind of a God do we got? Where things just happen and he's like, oh, God's lost control. Things just happen.
So you think it's
spun out of
more of a God incident?
Yes. I believe that May was created for me specifically. The logic is on my side. A guy from Iowa meets a girl from Jersey and in the state of Florida and gets married. That's not coincidence to me. That's God incidents. And especially when things like my prayers that have been so strongly answered and that first one so quickly, that's like, okay, that's not a coincidence either, right? I've been away from the church for years. The priest gets up there and talks about this when I sit and kneel and pray. So I've just seen it too many times in my life. And all 3 of the girls that you see here, May and I weren't getting pregnant for 5 years, and we started adoptions procedures. And the only reason I knew May was going to get pregnant, but the only reason I started adoption was because I knew it would help relax May's mind, because she was the type that she freaks out and it doesn't help, her relax and just, let things happen. So I says, all right, we started adoption. But at the same time we did that, I started a novena prayer. And to let you know the power of novena, where that came from, that is not a Catholic invention. The first novena happened when Jesus Christ ascended into heaven. He was gone. He had been with them for 40 days, but now, after he ascended into heaven, he was gone. The apostles were fearful. They thought they were going to be next. They were all going to be rounded up by the Sadducees and the Pharisees because they were still a threat to their power base, because people were still, talking about this Jesus guy. So they were locked behind locked doors for 9 days, where all they did was pray and fast for 9 days. That's where the word novena comes from, 9. So they prayed and fasted for 9 days. Well, what happened on the 10th day? The great birth of our church, Pentecost. And that is where we get the power of the novena. And it continues today to be a very powerful prayer tool that literally moves the hand of God. Because I prayed the novena in March, and 9 months later, May was pregnant.
And didn't you pray that by the end of the year she would be pregnant? And that's when you guys found out that you were pregnant with me?
So a novena means 9. I prayed and fasted 9 days. And 9 months later, before the end of the year in December, little Christina was inside of mommy's. And we started praying for that kid the day we found out she was pregnant. And it's the same with all of our kids. So that's the power of novena. And once again, it's the power of prayer. And you have to bring a little effort to prayer. All right. It can't be like a mechanical thing. It has to be something from the soul, from deep inside your soul, of who you are, because you are made in the image and likeness of God. And so when you pray, you have to understand there's power in that, because the Holy Spirit is dwelling inside of here. So when you pray with all of your soul, it's literally God praying to God, and things happen. I saw the hand move that first time at the church. I saw the hand move again when I prayed the novena for May to get pregnant. And after 5 years of trying, one novena, she's pregnant 9 months later.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. It really is. Miracles upon miracles. We love that.
I think that's also a good segue into the next question, because you're talking about the birth of Christina, and then we obviously followed shortly thereafter. So how did you manage raising 3 daughters and help them grow in their faith?
That is 100% grace.
Especially in today's day and age, we should add that to the question.
Because it's not like, I mean, when you come from a family of 11, I mean, I was changing diapers when I was 5. So you learn how to take care of babies because the older kids always took care of the younger kids. So the actual care and feeding of like infants and babies, that was nothing for me. I mean, I'd been doing that since I was 5. But raising girls, I mean, basically, like I said, me and my brothers were always together, but my sisters a little bit more when we got older. And so I learned how to, talk to girls and, be nice to them and stuff like that because they're your sisters. But so that came in handy later with the girls. But mostly I learned how to raise good girls by being a good husband to their mother. Because I already knew how to treat women by the way I treated May. Because my number one goal is to see my wife happy. I don't even care if I'm happy. If she's happy, that's good enough for me. That was my attitude in raising the kids. And I also knew that without discipline, you were only handicapping your children. Because I knew that for them to be successful in life, whether it was in a relationship, in a job, in education, if you didn't have discipline, you were going to fail. Because in all aspects of life, especially relationships that work, you have to have discipline and you have to have commitment. And so discipline and commitment are 2 things that their mother and I really stressed. And the other thing was, I like to have fun. So I would have fun with my girls every day. We would, when they were just little toddlers and stuff, I would crawl along the ground like I was a monster. And this one would try to help these 2 because I'd go and try to eat her, and she'd try to stop me. And then I'd go and pretend I was attacking their mother, and they'd all jump on top of me. And then I'd put them on my shoulders, and I'd walk them around the house, and they thought that was really cool. And then I'd throw them way up in the air and freaked out their mom. They would land on the bed, and I would take them outside, and we'd play, and the whole neighborhood would join in.
You were definitely the fun dad in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
no questions
asked.
asked.
I was the fun dad. But did you cross the fun dad?
No.
That's the balance that you got to have. That discipline, but the fun and the commitment to our faith. That didn't just come from me. And it's like I told them in my class. If I come to this class and I preach the commandments and how to live a good Catholic life, how to live a good moral life, and I don't live it at home, guess who's the first people that are going to know? My girls. And I didn't want my girls thinking I was a hypocrite. So what I taught, I walked. And their mother was the same way. Their mother, she preaches a tough game, but she also walks that same tough line. Because it is not easy to be an authentic Christian, especially in this darkened world. But that's what we are called to do. We are called to be apostles of light, just as the apostles were when Christ was there in the beginning of the church.
Dad, I love your point about really making that relationship with mom your priority, like especially the 2 of you, first of all, pursuing God together and nurturing your relationship and letting that be the example and the foundation for how you taught us. I think that's probably the best gift that you can give your kids. And I think seeing that growing up, that healthy and holy dynamic between you and mom was personally, I'm sure I speak for Gina and Vanessa as well when I say that's the greatest gift that you could have given us.
Well, I teach at men's conferences. I've been doing it, as you guys know, for about 15 or 20 years. And one of the things I tell these men, first of all, I say there is a hell. Nobody wants to talk about hell anymore. But the Bible says that's where the majority of people go. So I think we should talk about it. So in my men's conferences, I talk about it. And here's how I do it. I tell these men, I says, look, my worst fear is not going to hell for all eternity, as painful as that would be. And I know what I'm talking about a little bit on this side, how painful it can be. I says, but that would not even be my worst fear. My worst fear would be going to hell and seeing my 3 little girls beside me because I didn't do my job as a good Christian father. That is my worst fear.
Yeah, that really paints a picture, especially having a child now of my own. You can get super emotionally moved even thinking about that. So that, I think that's the first time I've heard him at least say that. It's also nice to put in perspective how Dad talks about this and how he's not only leading us as our family unit, but he's also done this sort of ministry all these years. And we've also gotten to witness that too, sort of like he was saying, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And one of the major ways you can do that is how you're spending your time. It's the most unselfish thing you can do. So
The next question actually came from me because it's funny. We come from a long line, at least on my mom's side, of Italian worrywart, so to speak. And I think me and Gina and Vanessa have all inherited that trait to one degree or another. But Dad, this has been such a blessing for us growing up that you tend to be the most unbothered of everybody. And you kind of stay the most even keeled in a variety of situations. So my question to you was like, how do you guard your spirit and like let nothing really bother you?
I think really what you're driving at is in this day and age with the spirituality and the chaos and government and politics and media and stuff like that, how do you keep an even keel and all that crap? Because basically it's like a garbage dump of stuff coming in. I mean, if you got a phone and you got any kind of, stuff coming in, a lot of it's dark and ugly, and it can cause anxiety and stuff like that. And here's how I feel you get over that. You do the right thing. And there was one reason why I was created, and that was to do the will of God in my life. That's the one reason I was created. And here's part 2 of that. If I do God's will in my life the way he created me to do it, then there's going to be people who go to heaven because I did God's will in my life, including, God willing, myself. So if every day I get up and my number one concern is, God, let me do your will today to the best of my ability, because that is the one overriding thing in my life that I just want to get right. If that is your attitude, and God is supreme, master of all powerful, all knowing, then what can stop you from doing God's will? There's freedom in knowing the Almighty Creator has already created me to do this one thing, his will. And if I do that one thing, his will, people will flourish and people will go to heaven because of that. And it's not me, it's him. So every day I get up and I try to do his will. And on the days I don't do his will very well, those are the only days I get nervous. So I try not to do those days. Every day I try to get up and I do his will. And it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter if I'm sick, I'm healthy, I had a bad day, I'm broke. None of that matters if I'm doing God's will, because in God's will, there's peace, regardless of circumstance.
Amen. Well said.
okay, last but certainly not least, what is the best advice that you can give to the community of believers?
That's easy. Like I said, everybody out there was created on purpose for a reason. And your reason in life is living God's will, what he created you to do. And I lose a lot of people right there because I think, well, they throw their hands up. What's God's will in my life? If you are living a moral life, for a Catholic, it means living a sacramental life. You go to church on Sunday, you go to confession when you need to, at least once a month, and you do acts of charity because we are to reflect Christ's love in our life. So it's not a passive thing. It's definitely something that you have to put effort into, which goes back to one of those episodes that formed my life. That effort in winning that tennis match. It's the same in my Catholic life. It's the same in my Christian life. No effort, no crown. No effort, no getting God's will done. Look at Jesus on the cross if you're looking for a baseline of where your effort should be, because that will push you every day to give a little more yourself. And that's why I carry a picture of a crucifix in my phone every day, because every day I see Jesus on the cross. Not because he's still there, but because that is a testimony of his humility, of his love for me, of his effort for how much he wanted to save me. And then I got to ask myself the question, how much do I love him back? And it's always embarrassing when I look at him on that cross because my effort is nowhere close to his effort. So my answer to that would be to always, every day, try to give more effort. Realize that you have a mission in this life, even if it's just being a single person. I know what my mission is. My mission was to raise 3 strong Catholic girls because that's the only way I know for certain that how to show to get them to heaven. And I don't care if they're married, if they have kids, if they're rich, if they're jobless. What I care about is, are they on the path to heaven? And if you've done your job as a parent, then you can have peace in your mind knowing they are on that way if they just keep giving that effort and doing God's will in their life. And I think you guys are doing a pretty good job with that. I'm so proud of you with the effort with this podcast. And I know that everybody that watches this podcast is going to benefit from the love that you have, not just for your fellow man, but for God, who you try to shine light on every time you guys do one of these podcasts. And that is something that you can take with you, and hopefully you'll hear those wonderful words, well done, good and faithful servant.
Oh, that is amazing. Well done, Dad.
I think this is, I don't even know. Do we still have a podcast? Or is it Bonded Dad Edition? I don't know. Drop a comment.
I think we're going to have to contact my agent, and we're going to have to work out some details, but could work.
Dad, I think this was my favorite episode. This was so good. I am so glad we had you here today and that you got to share this with others. It's so beautiful, so powerful.
It's just such a gift from God that you're our dad. And
for me,
it was beautiful.
This was just a great reminder of how powerful your stories are and how much they just caused me to look at life in a whole new light. So with God on our side, there's nothing we can't overcome. So it's great to have a guest that's our father on the podcast.
There's great hope in God. And the great hope is that he took a weak and a sinful man, and look what he did. Because he is the God of goodness and grace. And if he can do that with me, he can do that with anybody.
That's right. We love you, Dad. We love you.
We love you guys.
Well, thank you guys for bonding with us and bonding with our dad. And we'll see you in an episode soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.